Muscles of the abdomen. The skeletal muscles of the abdomen form part of the abdominal wall, which holds and protects the gastrointestinal system. These muscles are divided into vertical and flat groups. The flat muscles flex, laterally flex, and rotate the trunk. The fibres run in different directions and cross each other, strengthening the abdominal wall. The vertical muscles aid in compressing the abdominal cavity, stabilising the pelvis, and depressing the ribs when a person is walking. Toward the midline of the body, the muscles come together by a flattened tendon termed an aponeurosis. The aponeuroses of the individual muscles merge together to form the linea alba. The rectus abdominis is a long vertical muscle that covers the abdomen. It is split through the midline by the linea alba and separated by horizontal tendinous intersections which give rise to the six-pack, or eight-pack in this case. The rectus abdominis originates from the pubis and attaches to the lower edge of the rib cage and the sternum. There is only one action for the rectus abdominis. Looking now at the oblique muscles, first of all, we have the external oblique muscle. The external oblique is the largest and most superficial of the flat muscles. The external oblique originates from the pelvis and inserts on the lower ribs. It has three actions that you will need to identify. Remember, the insertion will want to move closer to the origin. The origin generally being the most stable part. If we're to remove the external obliques, we then see we have the internal obliques. The internal oblique is smaller and thinner. Its fibres run perpendicular to the external oblique, improving the strength of the abdominal wall. The internal oblique originates from the pelvis and inserts at the lower ribs. This muscle also has three actions. The transverse abdominis is the deepest of the flat muscles. If we remove this chest plate, we can see the transverse abdominis muscles with those transversely running fibres across the abdomen. So the transverse abdominis originates from the lower ribs and the pelvis. So from the pelvis all the way to the lower ribs with transversely running fibres. Its actions are not actions that we think of, but it's more for compression than actual movement itself. Lying below the pectoral muscles are the intercostal muscles from the chest wall, and they play a key role in ventilation of the lungs. So the intercostal muscles, we can see our internal intercostals here between our ribs. The internal intercostals are continuous with the internal oblique muscles of the abdomen, and they depress the ribs. The external intercostals we can see again between the ribs, and they're continuous with the external oblique muscle of the abdomen, and they elevate the ribs. Removing that chest plate, we're now turning our attention to the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a large, flat, sheet-like muscle that extends horizontally underneath the rib cage. Functionally, the diaphragm separates the thoracic cavity, containing the lungs and the heart, from the abdominal cavity, which contains the digestive organs. The diaphragm's position allows it to aid in ventilation. When it contracts, it physically moves the lungs by altering the volume of the thoracic cavity. So the diaphragm has several points of origin along the sternum, the lower ribs, and the lower vertebrae. The muscles combine into a central tendon. So actions of the diaphragm are it contracts, it flattens and increases the volume of the thoracic cavity. When it relaxes, it returns to its normal shape, reducing the volume of the thoracic cavity. The posterior muscles, The back is composed of numerous muscle groups. The superficial muscles of the back are responsible for movement of the shoulder, which are discussed in the next laboratory session. The deeper back muscles we can group together into the erector spinae group. This group facilitates movement of the head and neck and are fundamental in maintaining posture and balance. There are 9 muscles in this erector spinae group. Some extend along the posterior surface of the vertebral column from the median sacral crest upward. Some of the muscles extend from the lower vertebrae to the curve of the ribs. Some pass from the posterior surface of the ribs to higher vertebrae, which we cannot see on this model. And finally, other members of this group extend directly from lower to higher vertebra, and one even reaches the skull.